This is Ready, Set, Renovate, a podcast delivering renovation, inspiration, and motivating you to put your home beautifying ideas into motion. How much prep goes into designing a custom renovation? In this episode, we tackle that topic and address why exactly design is essential. And who better to have the conversation with than an architect and an interior designer. Our architect today is Billy Zion with Zion Architects, and our interior designer is Laurilyn Hall with Thrive Architectural Interiors. As you're about to see, these two individuals have extensive experience in the realm of renovation design. Let's get to it. All right, so here we are with Billy Zion and Laurilyn Hall. Laurilyn is with Thrive Interiors, and the backstory on the idea to get you guys together is this. I've seen you work, Billy, a lot. I know the value you bring to the table at Daniel Builders. And I've seen your work as well, Laurilyn. You actually helped us here recently in an awards process. And just looking at your work and the value you bring made me think, hey, why don't we get this out so other people can see what goes on behind the scenes in a design process? Obviously, when you're a client, you're working closely with you two. But when you're not a client and you're wondering, okay, why do I need an architect or why do I need a designer? I thought this would be an episode that could help clarify that answer.
Sure.
Why? So we'll dive in, and we'll start with you, Laurilyn. Just tell us a little bit about the role that an interior designer plays through the design process.
Yeah. So what an interior designer does is to guide the vision and the goals of the client and make sure that happens for them in terms of the human experience. So I'll define that term a little bit. And that's how the space is going to work and look for them at the end of the day. And everything from working through the function of a layout with them and the interior, their cabinetry components, to selecting finishes to make the whole thing come together beautifully. That's the role of an interior designer.
And there's obviously, I guess, emotion involved, right? Because people feel strongly about how their house looks and feels, and you're helping them kind of process that, I guess, and navigate that and make selections.
Yep, that's right. It is very personal, and that's really the part that I love about it, that every single project is different because every single person and every single client is different, and they have a unique story to tell, and they have an opportunity to do that in a new way through the renovation of their space.
And then as for you, Billy, going into an architectural design, what would be the case that you would make to somebody who may be thinking, I don't need to do that? And maybe they don't, but if they did and they thought, I don't, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, you're right. There are maybe certain instances where an architect would not be required. If it's a smaller space, or if you're not really reconfiguring space or moving walls, then, maybe an architect isn't needed. But there is value, especially once you start talking about manipulating space, moving walls, changing the structure of a house. An architect can certainly help you when that comes to mind, because, a renovation is kind of a different beast, so to speak. Yes. I mean, as architects, we're trained to design kind of standalone buildings, but once you start talking about an existing home, you've got that existing structure to think about. So what an architect can do is come into that house, that existing home, thoroughly document it, make sure...
When you say document, like with pictures, or how would you
Pictures,
describe that?
We take accurate measurements of every room, or, whatever area of the house is being renovated. So at the end of that, you're given an as-built floor plan, and it's really, sometimes it's not until the client sees that when they really start to figure out, okay, this idea, this vision I had in my head may or may not work within this space now that I see it on paper. So what an architect can do is thoroughly document the existing space, show it to the client on paper, and then start to insert their vision within that existing footprint. And at that point, they can better decide if what they envision is going to work or not.
Sounds like a foolproof process because you're looking at what's already there. And instead of just having an incredible wild fantasy that you could do all this stuff, it kind of sets some parameters, right? Like this is what we have to work with.
That's right. Yeah. There are constraints, and it is a struggle sometimes. I mean, you do have to deal with time, of course, and budget. So, and those are there with every project. And that's something we try to meet, that expectation of time and budget. We try to meet on every project. So it's a challenge, but there's also, like Laurilyn was talking about the client's vision for what they want to see at the end. There's also that expectation you have to meet with them to try to get to that final, what they expect to see at the end, while at the same time having to deal with time and budget. So yeah, it's a challenge.
So you two are working together, through the design phase and putting together a design package that will ultimately be what the client decides whether or not to move forward based on that. Right. So what are some of the big hurdles and challenges for you, Laurilyn, in getting to that point? Obviously, you're a key player on the design team, but getting the information necessary for that design package to come together, what are some of the hurdles to get to that point?
Well, the first hurdle, of course, is just to understand the scope of the work and the goals of the client. And that takes a lot of listening on the front end just to get to know who these people are and what they want to accomplish. After that, being the first hurdle, it's then making some decisions. So guiding them through the selections process in particular, where we're going to go to showrooms, we're going to talk to sales reps, we're going to look at options online and try to match those to the vision they have within their budget.
Do you find it can quickly go off the rails when they start seeing all these options?
Yes, it can, because the sky's the limit in a sense. When you walk into a showroom, there are just so many options. But I always say preparation for that is key. So I like to give the client a little bit of homework, or at least ask questions while I'm at an initial consultation to understand what is the look they're going for and try to define that in terms for them. So are we looking for a more traditional style or contemporary? I try to pull out that information. I will send them online to look at images and gather inspiration so we can visually communicate about the look for the selections before we go to the showroom. And I think that's very, very important, because then once you get there and you see all of the options, you can come back to, what is our end goal here? What do we want this to look like?
So you're clarifying like the mission going in. This is what we need to do.
Right.
So it's not just a free for all. Like it's not everything.
Yeah.
That I know setting expectations has been kind of a theme through a lot of these podcasts. We interviewed a builder consultant earlier, and he talked about how setting expectations on the front end makes such a huge difference in building trust, as well as just getting through the project, moving through the project in a timely manner. What role does like Pinterest, Instagram, some of these hows, I don't know if, I guess you would be familiar with hows. What role are they playing in clients coming to you saying, I want this?
Right. I mean, we do see a lot of that, and I think it is very helpful. It helps communicate to us what their taste is, what their style is, and again, what they're envisioning for that end result. So it does help. But like I said, once we document that as-built drawing, sometimes those Pinterest images don't always fit within the footprint, right? And then we kind of have to adjust their expectations at that point, or maybe fit within the budget. So they are helpful, but we have to keep in mind the constraints of the project while still trying to get that look. Maybe we can get the same look, but by doing something maybe a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's an interesting word too, constraints.
Right.
I think one of the major misconceptions about what architects do is they design without any constraint. And then they turn it over to a builder only to have the client be sticker shocked by, hey, if you want to build that, it's going to be way more than what you may be thinking.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that does happen a lot. If we aren't held accountable as designers to time and budget and what the owner wants, then right. I mean, we're creative
Sure.
by
Yeah.
nature. So, I mean, if it were up to me, I would just keep drawing and
Yeah.
creating and
Spare no expense.
visualizing
Yeah.
and, spending all this money, but that's not reality. We've got to live within those constraints. So,
Does being part of a team where you have input from builders
oh yeah,
help in that way?
Yes, because we're experts in one area, but we need that collaboration from other experts in order to reach that final goal.
Right.
It's a huge benefit, and I like to look at constraints as opportunities too.
right.
Now that you see what is possible or what isn't possible, you can then work more creatively with what you've got. So it really is a positive thing at the end.
Right.
To have that team.
It's accountability.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
a good word for it.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Well, you have so many opportunities as far as direction you can design things in, so many styles. And you mentioned getting to know the client is very important. What are ways that you really tune into their personality so you can almost anticipate what a selection they would like or not like be?
Yeah, there are several components to that. The first one would be simply visiting their home. So going into where they're living right now and being an observer. So taking note of the things that they have already in place, you can identify styles and then asking them as a follow-up, is this something you want to continue or are you looking for a change? So observation of where they're living and how they're living is really important. I would say also active listening. So as we're talking to them, really listening to the clues they're giving us about their priorities, things that are really important to them to accomplish.
Both verbal and nonverbal, I'm sure, right?
That's right. Yeah, that definitely happens. So those things put together really help me to identify which direction they're probably going to go. And then the other thing is a little bit of personality profiling, right? Whether it's sort of a DISC evaluation of them, are they the a strong decision maker, or do they need a little bit of more guidance? That plays into it as well.
Earlier, before we started this conversation, you were talking about there's a difference between a decorator and a designer.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, they do go hand in hand. So any design project is probably going to, at some point before, it's a turnkey project, have a little bit of decoration involved. So it's part of the same family, but design really goes into, as Billy was referencing, the manipulation of space. So the changing of interior walls, in my case, really, and the idea behind design is a plan. I mean, that's the definition. To design is to plan. So I'm trying to create a plan that has some complex criteria and bringing together a cohesive product in the end. Whereas a decorator may be called in just to handle a very small part or piece of that total design. So it really is a broader definition to be a designer, and you take on a greater scope than a decorator.
When it comes to the creativity piece, are there times where you're like, I'm just hitting a wall. I can't get those creative juices going.
Right.
And if so, how do you get them going?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I think it's important to be part of a team. I mean, if you're trying to do this in a bubble by yourself, you do hit that wall, or you come up with an idea that you think is it, and you get in front of the owner, and that's obviously not it. So it's important to have accountability within a team to help you break through those barriers. So you may take a design to a certain point and then share it with somebody else in your design team and say, what do you think about this? Are there other ways I can do this that I'm not thinking about? And usually there are. I mean, inevitably there's always something you haven't thought of, and it's until you put it in front of somebody else, until you realize that.
It comes to mind.
Yeah.
What about you, Laurilyn? How do you get your creative juices going?
Well, I remember watching a documentary of Frank Gehry, who is a famous modern architect. And he said that feeling like a fraud and being in denial and procrastination is just all part of the process. So, sometimes you just got to own those things, take a walk, go do something different and come back to your work.
Right.
But it really does, the way through often is just talking to another person, trying to turn the problem over and look at it differently, or get additional resources to help attack that problem.
Right. And sometimes it does take going back to the owner with, maybe everything you've come up with once you hit that wall, and then they actually may
Can
introduce
inspire
new
more
ideas. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What happens? I love creative people, by the way. I admire them, aspire to be one. But this, I would think, would be hard. You pour your heart and soul into putting together something that you think is amazing, only to have the client shoot it down, say, don't like it.
Yeah.
Do you have to have thick skin, I guess, to press on through, or does that even phase you? Like, it's just part of the process.
Well, I mean, it's their project. At the end of the day, they have to live there. So my ideas take a back seat to their goals. So in a way, it's all part of the process, and I think it's to be expected. And again, even that as a constraint becomes an opportunity.
So you want them to give both positive
yes.
and negative. Don't shy away from the negative.
Right, right. Direct communication, clear communication, that's the best way to get a successful project. So it's not a threat, it's actually an opportunity. It's part of the process.
Good. Yeah.
But I mean, I would think I'd probably be dishonest if I said I did not struggle with that, because I think as designers, we do have a certain
sensitivity,
ego, so to speak.
Yeah, sure.
We're kind of built up to, you're the architect, you know what you're doing, you have the best ideas, and we think we do a lot of times, but even if we think it's a great idea, once we show it to them, they're kind of stuck on that initial vision, and we have to respect that. We have to put our egos to the side and say, this isn't about us. This isn't about them. At the end of the day, saying, look at this kitchen that Billy Zion designed. That's not what we want. We want them to feel like it's theirs and they came up with it, and it's uniquely suited for their family. So yeah, we have to.
Well, that's so important in all walks of life, having that level of humility.
That's right.
I mean, especially when you're on a team, obviously you can't have a huge ego to be part of a team or on a team, but no, that's really good. I take it that as you go through these processes with people and make or create a design, that you form some pretty strong relationships. Is that the case? And do you see many of the people who have teamed up with you on or contracted with you come back again and again?
Yes. Yeah. People are the best part. The relationships you build. And I teach as well. So I tell my students, don't get into this business if you're not ready to build relationships, because and it really is the most rewarding part in the end. And not only just to have repeat customers, but friends and contacts in making your life more interesting and colorful. So some of those relationships continue on well past a project, and it's a very rewarding part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. We always want to connect with our clients, because that's what it's all about. We're hired to serve them, to help them. We don't want to be this third party that comes in and tells them what to do. We want to truly understand who they are, who their family is, and at the end of the day, have feel like we had a part in making their family better because of the better space that they're given, right?
Yeah, and that's the type of person I know we all want to work with, right? Mm-hmm. We don't, even if someone's extremely gifted, but they just don't know how to work with people. It's almost like the doctor who doesn't have bedside manner. You have to have a degree of bedside manner.
Right.
Obviously, the intelligence, the skill, the giftedness is a huge part. But when you have that plus what you guys are talking about, the relationship, you have a really good scenario going. How are you staying sharp as far as ongoing education goes? You mentioned you're a professor, Laurilyn. And I know just having to teach a topic keeps you on your toes, right?
It sure does. Yes, that. I have a master's degree in interior architecture and design as well, which really helped me to develop and round out my skills, even past my undergrad training and my experience. But also being a part of professional organizations really helps to keep you sharp, I think. Organizations like National Kitchen and Bath Association, the Home Builders Association, there are all kinds of things like this in our field. So I think those have been particularly important for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. As part of the Architectural Association, American Institute Institute of Architects, you are required to have a certain amount of hours, as far as learning units, I think they call them. So throughout the year, I'm having to accumulate those hours. So I'm always, looking for things online where I can get my credits. So I'm always reading and, looking for ways to get those credits. But it's a good way to learn and to keep you in touch with what's going on out there because, things change. Construction techniques and methods change and materials are changing. So we have to stay up to date with those changes.
Speaking of those changes, can you give us some insight? And I usually bring this up in each podcast. What are trends that you kind of see maybe developing in your field of expertise? Are there things that you see that we may be seeing more of in the future? Are you tracking with any particular trends?
Well, I would say COVID had a big impact on the way people live and work. So you see a lot more going on and trying to keep a home environment, but also being able to work from home,
Right.
and vice versa. In the commercial world, it's bringing flexibility to the workplace and how those areas are designed as well. So that the pandemic really changed the way we, as a culture, and really as a global culture, work and live. So trends are definitely coming out of that.
Yeah, and also, again, in line with materials and methods of construction, I think there are trends continuing, trying to find ways to make houses more efficient. With maybe the types of windows or doors, or the types of materials you put on the outside of your home to help with efficiency. So, yeah, thinking about that throughout the design process is something that is valuable too. And I see a lot of people thinking about their energy costs.
A lot of aging in place as well. People
Yeah,
stay in their
That's a
homes
good
longer.
point. Yeah.
We're living longer, we're healthier. So, but preparing to be able to be as independent as long as possible. So people are really investing in their homes in that regard as well.
That's a huge trend. Yeah. Aging in place, that I guess both of you actually get involved in to some degree, or as the boomer generation keeps
Right.
growing older.
Right.
my
And they
dad
want
wouldn't
larger
like me to say
spaces. Yeah, they want larger spaces where, their family can come over and gather. So we are seeing, I'm seeing trends for, larger living rooms, maybe doing away with the typical dining room off to the side and using that space, as a bigger gathering area.
Do you think the tiny home trend is going anywhere? That was one that it seemed like it was getting started, then kind of went away for a while.
I don't think it's going away. I think there are still people out there who are drawn to that. Again, with the efficiency, smaller space can be more efficient if you're interested in living off the grid and
simple life.
Right. Yeah. And there are still people out there looking for that. So yeah, I think there is still value in that type of design.
Do you have a dream project, like one that you would just love to do? And I know that's a difficult question for sure, but I'm asking for honesty here. The project that you're like, man, that would be the opportunity of a lifetime to get that project.
Well, I think, as far as the dream goes, I've always dreamed about moving to the beach and just doing beach homes for the rest of my life.
A good
But
dream.
that may be more about the location than anything, but that's definitely been a dream.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think any project where, and this is rare, where a client comes to you and says, I'm going to build a house. I want to build a house. This is my lot. I wanted about this many square feet, but I just want you to just do whatever you think is best. You have free reign to design whatever you want to. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Creative
And, I'll write a check at the end for whatever.
blank check. That's a great.
Unleash you, right?
Yeah. And that never happens, but, there are moments, of course, where you do have free reign to insert your personal design. So
Yeah, sure. But in reality, the best projects are always those that the client does put their trust in you, and you have a really great back and forth,
Right.
and you're able to feel like you, as Billy said earlier, really contribute to their future and their family.
Right.
At the end of your career, when you're looking back, what do you want to be remembered for? What kind of mark do you want to be known as leaving?
I would say I would like to be remembered as an architect who helped people, who served people, who wasn't out to push my agenda, my design style on someone, that I was actually an entity that's here to help someone who doesn't know what to do, that, had a vision in mind, and that, Billy was able to come in and help me realize that, unselfishly, but, still help them and serve them in a way that I've been educated to, I guess.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to echo that because, I mean, the name of my business is Thrive, Thrive Interiors. So the reason I started it was to help people to do just that. I'm a firm believer that if our space is customized to our needs and our lifestyle, that we're going to be able to use our giftedness in a way that we couldn't do quite without it. And because that's a way that I have a skill in how I can contribute to the community around me and to those that my clients that I care about, that's why I do what I do.
And we do have gifts and skills, we all do. And it's easy to assume sometimes that, all right, this client should know that, their bedroom should be this big. Don't they know that? No, they don't know.
Yeah.
So there is value in the knowledge that we have. And so we need to be willing to share that.
Yeah, and break it down on a real simple level. Yeah, that's a good point, that can't really assume people just naturally know what you've known for years and years and years.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, this is the part of the podcast. If people want to team up with you, either of you, let's start with you, Billy.
Yeah.
How do they get started? What do they do? Zion Architects is the business you head up. You're also the architect for Daniel Builders.
Right.
But if somebody's thinking, man, that's the kind of guy I want designing my house or my business, tell them what the process is to.
Sure. Well, obviously you could give me a call or text me or email me just to initially get in touch with me. And I'd love to meet with you in person, get to know you a little bit through, over a cup of coffee or I love coffee. So if you want to get coffee, we can do that. And just start the process with a conversation, and maybe bring any ideas you have to the table. And then at that point, we can set up, a follow-up meeting where we might meet on site. Maybe I could bring some ideas that I have. So just get the process started with an in-person, face-to-face. I think is the best way to do it.
Okay. That's great. So if there is that person out there with the deep pockets that is going to fulfill your dream of one,
That's right.
go,
right.
you know how to get to them now.
That's right.
What about you, Laurilyn?
Contacting me through Facebook or Instagram or giving me a call, and then we'll just talk about the process and what that might look like for their home, and then certainly go out and visit the site and move on from there.
Guys, this has been rich. This is really good conversation, and I think it's helpful for someone, as you mentioned, who may not be familiar with all that an architect does or all that a designer does. But just getting familiar with your personality is a huge step in that direction, and you've given us that opportunity today, and for that I'm grateful.
Thank you. It's
Thanks,
been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great.
We're delighted you tuned in for today's episode of Ready, Set, Renovate, your guide design build resource. Are you ready for your home to undergo a transformation? We'd love to talk to you about it. Visit us at danielbuilders.com and tell us about the home renovation you envision. In the meantime, subscribe to Ready, Set, Renovate, and we'll keep the renovation inspiration coming.